tere tulemast kuulama Deltakutse podcasti. Kui meditsiin on see, mis paneb sinu südame kiiremini põksuma, siis oled sattunud täpselt õigesse kohta. Mina olen doktor Carr ja täna oleme kokku pannud midagi eriti ägedat. Kätte on jõudnud jõulud ja seega on ka Deltakutse jõulueri aeg. Sel korral on meil lisaks jõuluhõngule veel üks eriline põhjus tähistamiseks. Meie tänane episood on inglise keeles, sest meil on külas väga eriline külaline. Mul on tohutu au tutvustada teile doktor Carri, kes on Kanadas Toronto ülikooli erakorralise meditsiini professor. Ta on arst ja inspireeriv lektor, kellel loengud on vallutanud lavad üle kogu maailma. Koos doktor Carriga võtame ette teekonna erakorralise meditsiini maailma. Räägime, milline see välja näeb Kanadas, mis väljakutsed meid ees ootavad ja millised on tema jõulusoovid, et muuta erakorraline meditsiin turvalisemaks patsientidele, kutsuvamaks töötajatele ja paremaks kogu ühiskonnale. Nii et haarake kuum jook, võtke endale kõrvale mõned piparkoogid ja asume koos seda põnevat maailma avastama. So it's my extreme honor to introduce Dr. Carr, who is a professor in the field of emergency medicine from Canada. Thank you so much for being on this small Estonian podcast.
Oh, it feels big to me. Thanks so much for having me.
So I made a small introduction in Estonian about your accomplishments and about your lectures as well. I think the first time I heard your talk was in the Emergency Medicine Cases podcast, where you gave a really interesting talk on syncope and how to differentiate different reasons for syncopes. So starting from there, and I've heard your lectures in the European Society of Emergency Medicine Congress, and it's a great honor to have you on board. And I'm sure that there's loads of Estonian fans who have been following in the same way as me.
Thank you. I'm sure you said kind words, but I think it just goes to underscore the importance of podcasts like you're doing in terms of, I was just with Anton Hellman, who does emergency medicine cases. He did the EM Summit, and I was with him out for dinner last night after the summit, or a few nights ago, and I said, when I'm in Europe, everyone wants to talk about EM cases, and that's really the amazing part of emergency medicine is the foam community, open access, free knowledge translation, and whether it's a small podcast like you're staying in Estonia, it's a great way to make a difference. And, I've always said, and I think what my mantra has always been, is if you want to save lives in emergency medicine, you teach. And teaching now has gone to include podcasts like this one. So thanks so much for having me.
It's really humbling to hear it. And actually, as I was striving to talk to in Estonia, where we are recording this episode, I was listening to Anton and I was listening to emergency medicine cases. So it sounds really surreal that we have come this far in a way. And it's really humbling to hear those words. Quick question for you. Is it okay if I call you David?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, perfect. So David, you work as an emergency physician and clinical investigator, right? Can you talk a bit more in what hospitals you work?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of emergency medicine. My main hospital is the University Health Network in Toronto, which is two sites, Toronto General and Toronto Western. Toronto General is like the third ranked hospital in the world. It's a major cardiac center, and it's a very major academic ivory tower hospital with all the bells and whistles, complex stuff that you're like, what is wrong with that person? I've never even heard of these diseases. And then Toronto Western is more of a community hospital, an academic hospital that's really part of the downtown Toronto community. Both hospitals are inner city hospitals. So we deal with a lot of marginalized, underhoused patients. And then also part-time, I work about 3 shifts a month in a community hospital in the northern part of the city called Mackenzie Health, which is a really busy community hospital where I don't have trainees with me and where I see a lot of pediatrics, because in the downtown hospitals, we have a major pediatrics hospital that you basically see no children. So always, and I've been doing this for about 21 years, in an effort to keep up my pediatrics, I've worked in a second hospital to keep up my kids' stuff. And that's kind of my emerge work. I'm also the medical director for our local baseball team, the Toronto Blue Jays, where I'm there for stadium medicine, disasters, different stuff, which is fun because you'll realize that at some point in your life, no one's going to pay you for things you're not really good at. And for me, I couldn't make a living playing professional sports. So doing emergency medicine in a sports event has always been my passion and something I've always done. And I do lots of different gigs. And I think the thing about emergency medicine is you'll realize is it's such a portable skill set that people want you on different platforms. So lots of great career paths for emergentologists.
That's really inspiring, and I definitely want to ask more about the sports medicine field as well. So as a quick reference, I looked up some statistics. So from the beginning of this year in Estonia, there's 1.3, just over 1.3 million people that live in the whole of Estonia. And according to Wikipedia, inside the city of Toronto, there's 2.8 million people. And I imagine the metropolitan area is a lot bigger. So when you mentioned that you see some diseases that you don't know the name of, I imagine that the Estonia is just so small that we maybe never see it, some of them.
Yeah, I mean, not that. I mean, our metropolitan area is probably 6, 7, 8 million people in terms of the greater Toronto area. You know, when I'll kind of lump Toronto into all these surrounding suburbs, some people will identify, I'm from Burlington, or I'm from this, I'm from Hamilton, I'm from Brampton, I'm from Mississauga. There's all these suburbs that are almost in that greater Toronto area. So yes, it's a big city. Great country, and emergency medicine has been a very rich specialty in this country for a long time.
But how long has it been special?
I think 1982. I think might correct me. It might have been was the first. We have two different training streams in Toronto, in Canada rather. We have a 3-year program and a 5-year program, and they've been present since the late 70s, early 80s. In terms of a different formal recognition of the specialty. Okay,
that's really inspiring, and I think from Estonia it really started to become its own thing in the beginning of this century, in the early 2000s. So it has a smaller history. You mentioned also that you work in different hospitals and you also keep up with pediatric knowledge. Is it something that's usual in Canada or in the emergency medicine setting, or is it something that you're just doing because you're such a big fan of?
No, I think a lot of people work in a second site. We often will have people do 2/3 of their line commitment in one hospital and a third in community hospital. Remember, Canada is a completely publicly funded healthcare system. There's no private healthcare for anything. So whereas in some parts of Europe, people might have their rooms, or in the afternoon they go do other stuff. We don't have that avenue. Not that is good nor bad, but people often, just by the nature of being an emergentologist and probably ADHD and probably needs change and variety and diversity, I think what you find is a lot of people have side gigs, and a lot of my residents will look for side hustles, something that pays the bills that maybe is Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or maybe it's a second hospital that floats their boat with some diversity. People do lots of different things, and they will do one of their years of subspecialty to kind of get them to do that option, or things fall into their lap. Like one of the things I do a lot of work now is I do a lot of medical legal work. So for both the plaintiff, defendant, doctors, both sides, kind of looking at care and quality of care, and some consulting on that. So I think the recipe for longevity is not working shift work Monday to Sunday, evening, nights, and weekends the rest of your life. It's to have emergency medicine as a platform, and to have other things that you do that allow you to spend more time with your family and still earn a living.
Okay, that's awesome to hear, and also because it's a Christmas time and it's a Christmas special. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is and ask you, David, what are your top 10 Christmas wishes to make emergency medicine safer for patients, more appealing for staff, and better for society worldwide? And I imagine that was like a really good pearl that you just gave, that you have to diversify and you have to spend time outside of work as well.
Yeah, look, I think my number one wishes as a bit of a Europhile is that I would like to see it. To me, it's utterly ridiculous that emergency medicine is not a recognized specialty in all over Europe, especially picking on the German-speaking countries like Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And I think it needs more formalized stuff. You know, sometimes we have a specialty, but it's a little bit different. I think I want to see territorial improvements. Like I've been doing this for 21 years, so I've been training for a very long time. And there were times when We didn't do procedural sedation. We didn't do elective cardioversion. We didn't do RSI. We gave what I used to call fentanyl and midazolam, because we weren't allowed to give socks. And we would just snow people to do procedures or RSIs because anesthesiology didn't want us to use socks or rock. So I would love to see better access. I've witnessed firsthand the transformation of emergency medicine in Canada. And despite having a specialty that's 50 years old or just about that, it doesn't mean that at time zero you have a progressive specialty. It still takes time, and I'll tell you a really good story if that's okay. It's not in your top 10, but I think it's a really good story. I was in the Emerge not too long ago, and I saw one of our cardiologists, and I could tell that he was there as a patient, not as a doctor. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey, you okay? What's up? Can I help you with anything?" He's a good buddy. And he said, my dad's just here. He's in AFib. And I said, has he been seen? He said, not yet. I said, well, why don't I come see him? So, dad was in nuance at AFib. I went and saw him. I ordered some procainamide. 40 minutes later, it didn't work. After that, got a colleague. We sedated him with a bit of propofol. We cardioverted him successfully. And 40 minutes later, I wrote him a prescription for some oral diltiazem, some apixaban, and arranged to have some cardiology follow-up. And I looked at my colleague, and he was quite perplexed. And he said, "Do you know what you just did?" I'm like, "What?" He said, "My dad's been in the Emerge for like an hour and a half. In that time, you've tried chemical cardioversion, you've successfully electrocardioverted, you've given him his oral load, you've arranged his follow-up, you've given him his scripts. This is an hour and a half." And I said to him, "Jeff, I love you, buddy, but this would have been for anyone's dad." He said, "Really?" He said, "Do you know that I was planning on having him admitting to our coronary care unit? We were going to consult anesthesia. 6 hours later, they would come down. They would have demanded a transthoracic echo. We would have put this person in a special room and kept him NPO overnight, and he would have gone home tomorrow afternoon." And I said, "This is what we do. This is what we do is we take a complex problem and we make it simple. We are the 15 most interesting minutes of every other specialty, and we just put it all together. And that's what we can do that others can't. We just get shit done." So my biggest wish for the Christmas season is that you don't have the barriers with anesthesiology and some of the other hurdles in your hospital, that you work in a team game. Because at the end of the day, usually the driving force is finances, and usually it's the barrier is money. And it's sad to see that emergency medicine in some parts of Europe has been decided by financial constraints. So that is a big one, but that is my overarching principle of what I wish as a Europhile. That's a lot. I can go on to other stuff, but that probably is a big start.
Yeah. That was a really interesting story. I have to say that as a anesthesiology and intensive care resident, I hope that there isn't a big barrier between us. But I completely agree, and I feel like, I don't know how it is in Canada, but I feel like seeing my colleagues in emergency medicine and seeing what they do every day, and as you mentioned, as fast as they do. Do you also get a feeling that many colleagues from the hospital, from the other more different wards, don't really know how capable and how evolved this emergency medicine specialty has grown over the years?
I think, look, it's not like the 80s or 90s. I think the most important thing for there to be cross-pollination of the disciplines is that trainees and other specialties need to have mandatory time in the emergency department. And if you're an internal medicine resident and you've worked with me for a month in the emergency department, and know that I don't just I'm not a referologist. I don't just dump consults on you because I'm bored, that I actually try to do my stuff. Then when you're a senior resident and I call you, it's not because I don't like you that I'm giving you someone whose sodium is 121. It's like I'm doing my best. And sometimes people just need to come in, and sometimes it's not on a blood test. It's just the way it is. And I think that if we have trainees that work in the emergency department as off-service residents, they will see what we have. I mean, by nature, the specialty makes work for other people. And we refer people to other people. So we create work for you when you sleep. I understand that no one wants to get a call from me. Like I'm sure when I was a resident, I would rather sleep as well, but I can understand the frustration. And to the people who are at the hospital overnight and working, it tends to be the trainees who aren't making the big dollars to do that. So it creates a natural power struggle. But we're advocating for patients. And I think that's the big thing is I'm not doing this because I'm bored or I'm not doing this because I'm cruel. My job is to be an advocate for patients and use my judgment to do that.
That's a really good answer. And one of the reasons why I brought this maybe topic and why I really want to discuss it with you is because in Estonia, the emergency medicine field has evolved and it's getting better and better every year. But in that regard, there's not a lot of staff. The residency spots go unfulfilled, and there are problems of, bringing more people to the emergency medicine world, and maybe hearing your take as well. Like, what's the situation in Canada, and is there something that you have done to make it better, the situation?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is going to be obvious. Firstly, it's an extremely competitive specialty to get into. Most people who want to be emergency department physicians go unmatched. In our residency match, we have 0 unfilled spots in emergency medicine. It's one of the most competitive spots for residency after like ophthalmology and dermatology and some of the high pain, low stress specialties, not to offend anyone, but it's very popular. It's certainly the most, one of the most popular top 3, top 5. But I think it appeals to this generation's lifestyle in that you choose your own hours, you choose your own adventure. And I think the government's done a fairly good job of remunerating people to make a good amount of money. Like when I first started, emergency medicine was not a popular discipline. And I don't know if you ever watched the show ER, but and they're having a sequel coming out. But I was kind of that generation, which was when I was a med student, John Carter, who was a character, Noah Wiley on ER, was a med student. And we kind of grew up together and we kind of saw that struggle. And emergency medicine was not a residency choice. Like there would be one resident a year. And now we have 15 in one program and 15 in the other program. So people want to do it. The government's thrown money into realizing that if you had to ask a patient, a citizen of Estonia, someone who lives in Tallinn or Toronto, like, what is your biggest nightmare? It's like going to a hospital, sitting in an emergency department and waiting 8 hours to be seen by a doctor because you don't have access to your family doctor or you have a problem that needs to be fixed by someone else. Like that's everyone's nightmare. And governments have to realize that the only way to fix that is to make the situation better for the people who work in those emergency departments, be it the nurses, the doctors, all the technologists, so that you have to understand that we work 24/7, 365. We are availabilists. We are always fucking available. And that is the problem. And that is our specialty. But you have to pay people to do it and you have to respect them. And until you respect them and pay them, you will have gaps in your schedule and you will have gaps in your residency positions.
Okay, so I just heard 2 great news. So first one is that they're doing a sequel to ER. Is it
Yes.
Is it a series or is it a movie?
Yeah, it's called The Pit, and it's with Noah Wiley, and he's probably my age, so he's like a crusty emerge doc who's like 50 and frustrated, and it's 15 one-hour episodes. And Mel Herbert from EM Rap, who was like the person who really was the first podcaster in emergency medicine. I don't know if you ever listened to EM Rap. It was or heard about it. Paid subscription. Unbelievable in the day. You used to get mailed cassettes and you'd put them in your car, and then it became CD-ROMs, and now it's online. Mel's consulting on the show, so I can't wait for it, and I'm going to watch it with my kids this time around, so it'll be cool.
Oh, that sounds awesome, because I grew up with ER as well, and I remember my mom watching it, and me as a smaller kid watching it as well, and being mesmerized by what everyone is doing, and also like the life there. And the second great news is that ER is popular in Canada. That's great to hear.
It's the trajectory you have to get to, right? Like I think if you think about it in a lot of ways, it depends how you remunerate people. Look, the downside of the specialty is it's 24/7, 365, right? I remember being like your vintage and being at a party with my wife and someone saying I had to go home early because I had to work the night shift, and they said, oh, well, I guess because you're junior, you have to work nights. And I said, well, unfortunately, this is just what I signed up for. And we have policies for when you don't do nights, but the reality is you're going to work evening, nights, and weekends for the rest of your life. And that's tough on a marriage. That's tough on a life. That's tough being a father, a wife, a husband, a son, whatever you are, daughter. And I think that's the challenge. And it's the reason why I alluded to earlier, people have these side hustles and these gigs on the side, because you give up a lot. Like you give up a lot as an emergentologist in terms of your personal life. I've always said, and I don't think I want to know the results of this study, but if you did a simple study through the Stone Age College of Emergency Medicine and say, what specialty are you in? Are you married, single, or divorced? And are you happily married, unhappily married? And I don't know how emergency medicine would do, but I don't think we're doing better than other specialties.
Yeah.
I don't think we're that popular in the life, marriage, happiness state, and that's a big problem.
Which is actually the most important part, right? Which actually counts in the end. Yeah, I don't want to know the results of that as well.
No. No, I mean, at the end of the day, when I think about my career, I want to be known as a good son, husband, father. Emergentologist is down the line, right? Like I think it's all about, you got to love your job and you got to be good at it. But those other things, if you don't have strong relationships in your other things, you ain't going to be good at your job. So having that support team is the way you become a good emerge doc. Without that, you end up a statistic.
But do you have any tips to achieve that? Is it that you have to know how to say no, or like what's your tips in achieving that? Because I feel like as a starting doctor, you feel obliged to say yes to everything, to take every opportunity to be as good as you possibly can, and then other things suffer. And do you have any tips to?
It's funny. I just gave rounds to our residency program on burnout and wellness. And I'm not someone who does yoga and journals and meditates and all this stuff. I just kind of said, look, I love emergency medicine and you need some passions and you need support. So my big tips are, one, strong family support, strong friend support, have your friends for failure. Sarah Gray, one of my colleagues in Toronto, she's a brilliant emergent intensivist, talks about having failure friends. So I have a failure friends for marriage, for divorce, for bad cases, for things that bad financial decisions. Have someone you can talk to when life's not great. And that might be doctor colleagues or non-doctor colleagues. Have side hustles that allow you to do what you do and get paid and not work that hard so that you're making money and not feeling burnt out. I mean, we do have one of the highest burnout risk of every specialty. And, this business of say no, say early, I think it depends what you want in your career. I'm not saying that my start to career was famous in terms of I certainly said yes a lot and worked hard. I think everyone has their motivations, be it emotional or financial. I remember, though, a story really interesting was I had a colleague who was about 20 years older than me in the time, and I was probably in my early 30s and he was probably in his early to mid 50s. And he noticed that I was working hard when I came out. And he said, Dave, you're working so hard. And I said, yeah, Paula, I don't know. I'm working hard now. I don't have kids. I want to just work hard, make some money before I don't have kids and save some money to buy a house and all this stuff. And, he paused and he thought deep and he said, you know what? I'm going to tell you something, that life is a lot more fun when you're 30 than when you're in your 50s. So you never know what you're going to have 20 years down the road. Make sure you enjoy this life. And remember that emergency medicine is not a sprint. You'll make your money. You'll see your pathology. You got to be in it for the long game. And if all you want to do is work, you get to 50 and realize, yeah, I can't do this stuff. And yeah, I can't climb a mountain anymore and I can't ski anymore because my knees are bad and haven't prioritized my health or haven't prioritized my kids and they don't really want to hang out with me. And so I think you realize early that you have to have balance and you have to be driven by things that are not just work. and the ones who have meaningful, long careers. You know, I look at my mentors who are 60 and 70, and they're both now retired from emergency medicine, and I kind of feel orphaned in a lot of way, but they both had balance and they both had other things that kept them sane.
Is this something that, when we come back to the 10 Christmas wishes, is that something that we can formulate into one of the wishes as well?
Yeah, look, I think one of the wishes is obviously how to have a strategy to avoid burnout, have a mentor, and be a mentor. And I think that's important, is to pay this forward, to rely heavily on your failure friends and rely heavily to your mentors, your sponsors in emergency medicine who get you to your career goals that you want, and then pay it back to the next generation of talent. I mean, I always tell people, they ask, how do you get here? How do you get to be placed? Do you say yes? Do you say no? And I say, do the following exercise. In your hospital, in your residency program in Estonia, who's the emergency doctor that you want to have their career? If you could snap your fingers and have whose career, would you have her career, his career? Who do you want? And then if you want her career, then you make sure that person's your mentor. You make sure you get to that path, that you have all the people that get you there. And that's what you have to sort out and do. And then when you become old and gray like me, you have these people who want you to be your mentor, and you don't forget that at one point you were in their shoes.
That's really inspiring, and that is also something that I've been thinking about a lot as a starting physician, and seeking out mentors and looking mentors. I feel that maybe Estonians, I don't know how many Estonians have you met, but most Estonians are maybe more like guarded, not so open about their feelings as well, and I guess that makes it a bit more difficult as well sometimes.
Yeah, I can't say I've met a ton of Estonians. We're maybe warmer and fuzzier here. But I mean, look, obviously you have to find the ones you identify with, and who they may not have the exact same personality as you, but they may have similar clinical goals and a similar pathway. And it might be they have some great balance of emerge ICU and they do cool research, and that's what gets you going. But I think in that list, I mean, certainly if you want to reach career highs, you ain't doing this by yourself. Professionally, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's really good points. How did you find your way to becoming an emergency physician? What's your story in that sense?
It wasn't the most direct path. I had thought about family medicine. I thought about internal medicine. I had wanted to switch to be an internist. I was smart enough to marry an internist instead, because then I could have my brain through passive diffusion through her. And then, actually what happened was SARS hit in 2002 in Canada. Toronto had one of the SARS endemics. We were hit the hardest outside of a place in China, and we had SARS, and a lot of the residents and stuff were pulled from the hospital, and I volunteered in the emergency department and said, like, this is cool stuff. And they kind of I hadn't really wanted to do emergency medicine, but then during SARS I kind of helped out, and then they created a spot for me to I got a spot. I hadn't even got in, but a spot opened up for me, and it was the best decision that ever happened. Like, if I had to look back, like I think, look, to be a good emerge doc, you have to be an excellent internist. And I just don't have the patience to do what my wife does. Like, I can't hold 4 family meetings a day because this family didn't talk to that family, and now this brother wants an update because they don't talk to the sister. I can't have 4-hour meetings with Allied Health. I just need to make decisions quickly, coming in or going home. What test do I need to order? And, do I order enough tests to make myself sleep at night? And that's kind of how I practice emergency medicine, is quick decisions. And that's how I got into emergency medicine. It was never my dream, but it was no one's dream back in the 90s when I went to med school. Like, emergency, and I can imagine in Estonia, no one would even have conceptualized the stupidity of being an emergency doctor. But now I'd like to think that I'm someone who has helped, along with other great colleagues, to make this so that it's super competitive and that people want to do it because there's such a need. But how did you manage to do that? Is it through great colleagues doing this amazing podcast, or how did it change around? How did it become so popular? Like, how did the specialty, or how did my role in the specialty?
Maybe both, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think that, as I said earlier, like, I think everyone has a gift. Like, what I like to do is teach. What I like to do is translate knowledge and make it simple. And I just aimed big. So I just asked people if I could teach at their courses and conferences. And they said, well, who the hell are you? And I said, well, I attended your conference. I think it's really good. I would love to speak. Okay. I said, here, and I put myself on a limb. And when opportunities came up, I didn't say no. Like when someone said, hey, I'm writing a chapter in Tintin Alley and it could use a refresh. Do you want to do it? It's going to be a lot of work. You're going to do all of it. Sure. So I did say yes a lot, and I did throw myself out there. But, my goal was to be an educator, and my goal was to teach. It wasn't to design curriculums. It wasn't to build systems. It wasn't to do research. I mean, my clinical interest is weird, esoteric areas of medicine. So I would just see cool things and I would publish case reports on them. And what I would do is I would take something cool and I would say, oh, this is really cool. I've never heard of it, but I think people need to hear about it. So I would start with publishing it in a journal. Then I would say, I should put this at a conference. So I talked about it at a conference. Then I said, I should put this on a podcast or blog. And then I realized that's impact. Then I realized you took a disease entity that no one had heard of. You've now put it on local, provincial, national, and the international stage. And now people have heard of a disease or heard of an approach to something because you made that your goal. I knew I was never going to do groundbreaking research like in Canada, like the Ottawa ankle rules or CT head rules. I'm not a researcher. I don't have the patience for that. I just love good clinical medicine and finding gaps in emergency medicine that people don't know about and trying to get it out there.
I feel like it's such a great pearl of, just to summarize your talk, that you should know who you are, right? Like what's your strengths and what's your weaknesses, and maybe aim for the strengths as well. Because I feel like the similar way that if I would go into research, I would most likely fail. I wouldn't become the best researcher in the world, but doing a podcast, that's something that I really enjoy and I can really give back maybe more than as a researcher.
Yeah, and you took a risk. We were hanging out in Copenhagen and you approached me and then find the people you want to talk to emergency medicine about. Like, that's what Anton Hellman did. He started by I'm going to have people at University of Toronto, and we're happy. We're a big school, and we have lots of people. And then he just kind of expanded. I mean, you got to start somewhere, but you got to know your strengths, and you'll never be a good researcher. I'm going to tell you right out. If you don't like it and it's not what makes you excited, like, we're good at what we're passionate about. We can only fake things for so long. So I don't pretend to be something I'm not. That's kind of been how I wanted to have my career. But I also know that it's an N of one, right? Like, this is my journey. I'm obviously loud, obnoxious, gregarious, things like that. So it's natural. It's not everyone's journey. Yeah. Not everyone wants to speak in front of an audience and hear their own voice. To be that, it's some narcissistic trait for sure. But I think you just have to find what you love and do it. Yeah. And if you're not passionate, you will fail.
Yeah, and it was quite scary to approach you, but I'm really happy that I did. So that's well,
really I'm a pretty approachable person, as you know, Oliver, now that we've met and become friends and stuff. And but I think it's just about like just finding your passion. And the other thing I always say is like, just stay curious. It's so easy to be average at what you do. You can be an average intensivist. You can be an average emerge doc. I always say to the residents, like, what did you learn on the shift? What are you going to read up on? And if we work together and there's something that you kind of didn't know a lot about and I tell you about and you say, that was interesting. Well, you'll be average. Mm-hmm. But if you say, I can't believe I didn't know that. I totally need to know that. I'm going to go learn about that. I need to know more on that topic. And it burns you that you didn't know that at that moment. And it inspires you to read up more and maybe give a lecture on that topic or be fascinated by that. Then you become a star. Remember, whatever specialty you are, there's a standard distribution of talent. Not everyone's great. You just have to decide where you want to fit on the curve.
Absolutely. And I think like one of the reasons why podcasting is so great that every month I can sit down with, the top cardiologist of Estonia, top emergency physician in Estonia, and just absorb their knowledge. And of course, you being the highlight of, just getting that information and getting to know new information and new stuff. So I feel like I can't agree with you more. One of the things that maybe coming back to maybe burnout as well, like what do you do when you feel like you need a break from the world of medicine? You mentioned, having side hustles, having the family to support. Do you have anything else, any tips that if you want to really break away from the main passion?
Yeah, look, I travel a lot because of doing a lot of speaking in conferences. And one of the best things has been taking a kid to a conference. My kids are older, so they're 19, 17, and 15 now. But since they were about 6, 7, and 8, I tried to do one-on-one trips where I take one of them with me. And one of the most important things is in that 3, 2, 5 days, whatever we have together, I try to tell them I'm not on my phone. Because I'm like the worst on my phone. I'm on Twitter or X or whatever. And I say, okay, we're going to research this together. We're going to do a fun trip together. Great meals, great museums, great fun things to do. And it's just me and you. And we're going to have the best time. And to me, that's always been my unwind, is using medicine as a means of seeing the world and showing my kids the world.
And that's so smart that you can combine those things both together, right? In a way, like the best multitasking or the hack of the word, in a way, that you can do medicine and spend time with your loved ones as well.
Totally. And if travel's your thing, like, I know where you're from. And it's like, yeah, I want to go to Estonia. I've never been, right? Like one day I'll go to Estonia, right? And have a contact there. And, I think for me, travel's been my outlet. I can't say I'm a person who runs 25K every day and I get a high doing that. I'm sure I could do a lot more things and be a lot more active. For sure, that would help. But it's more just traveling and having these other, I try to work less and make more every year by finding jobs that don't take up as much of my time. You will come up to some distribution where you will do this many hours or this many shifts of emergency medicine. And at some point you start to be on the curve where you're doing less shifts. Well, I just turned 50 this year. I hate to embarrass that, but I don't admit that, but I don't know too many Estonians. So, but I'm 50. So it's like, I'm not doing as many shifts as I once did. So how can I earn a living, keep my mind active, keep my body active, preserve a level of income without doing, so many hours a week, a month? And that's the gift. And I think as you get more advanced, the more opportunities declare themselves. And if you're academically active or whatever you're active in, opportunities fall. Because as I said at the start of this podcast, everyone's interested in emergency medicine docs because you know everything.
Yeah, you're like
you just know a bit about everything.
You're like the second best doctor in every field. It's an expression that we hear in Estonia. Mm-hmm. That you have to be second smartest in every field. When you're traveling the world, have you seen like what's the biggest differences in emergency medicine field, or what's the like takeaways that you've experienced when traveling around the world?
Yeah, it's very country dependent. I remember one of the earlier talks I gave in Copenhagen. Oh, it was in Denmark a long time ago. I want to say like 15 years ago, and someone came to pick me up, and they were a cardiovascular surgeon, and they were the chief of the emergency department. And I was like, what the hell is this? They're like, oh, well, there's not a lot of work in CV surge in my country, so I became an emergency doctor. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You became an emergency doctor? Like, well, I just went down to emerge, and now I'm the chief of the emerge there. And I'm like, so I think that was like crazy. Like, you're a CV surgeon, and now you're an emerge doctor. Like, that made no sense to me. And look, a lot of it when I'm speaking to people at USM who are like, I'm an anesthesiologist, I'm a cardiologist, I'm an intensivist. Okay, but you're in an emerge conference. Like, how do you identify? None of my colleagues will say I'm any of those things. They're an emergentologist. They're an emergency doctor. Like, that's what defines them. They're not something else that just fell into emergency medicine and they're trying to push the envelope and advocate for the specialty. Like, I'm just further along our specialty. And that's the biggest difference in Europe, where, obviously Australia and the UK and maybe France and Canada and America, like, different. But much of Europe, I just feel like it's these trailblazers trying to push for something. And that's why whatever I can do to lend my voice, but it seems like the Stone Ages sometimes when I'm just in disbelief hearing the stories of the struggles of my European colleagues, which I don't have them at home.
Do you feel that that's one of the reasons why Canada has such a strong emergency medicine setting, that you have your own identity and it's like a sure thing, or it's a specific thing, that it's not like mixed, that you don't have to have different specialties in the same area?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, we will have in our 5-year training, you could do a 1-year fellowship. So you might do a 1 or 2 year fellowship. You might do 2 years of critical care, a year of trauma, a year of POCUS, a year of sports medicine, a year of palliative care, a year of geriatric emergency medicine, a year of toxicology, a year of neuro stuff. Like, you can, in your 5 years, pick 1 year of a subspecialization so you can be some sort of content expert. I think that's a really good system of doing it. But at the end of the day is you're an emergency doctor. You might like POCUS, but you're still an emergency doctor, and you might be able to do TEEs. Congratulations. But that's not what defines you. And I think it's so important that there has to be pride in what you do. And when I'm around a lot of Europeans, it's almost like, well, I just do some, it's just not there, like, I think the rest of the doctors don't see emergency doctors in the way that I see them. And you need buy-in from every other specialty. Like in Canada, and we have a big problem with primary care. And no one wants to do primary care in Canada for a variety of reasons. One, they're paid poorly, they're dumped on, and other specialties badmouth them nonstop. And until you pay people what they deserve, and until you stop disrespecting them based on either their length of training or what they do, you're just harming each other. And I think that's this culture in medicine as just bad talking every other specialty about how stupid they are. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not an ophthalmologist, so I can't be expected to know as much about ophthalmology as you. Therefore, if there's something that I overlooked, that's just what I'm capable of. But it's not an opportunity to say you're stupid. And I think too many times we're guilty of this, saying, oh, I got this terrible referral. What an idiot sent me this. That's so stupid. You know what? Live in someone else's shoes. Watch their journey. Watch their movie. And you ain't so special, I
think so many Estonians right now felt the resemblance of everything you said, and it's something that is a huge problem in Estonia for sure as well, especially the primary care. And I feel like also emergency medicine care as well. It's getting definitely a lot better, and but I feel like a lot of doctors still they don't get the same kind of respect that they should, or different specialties get. So it's really sad. But I think it's so inspiring hearing you talk about how it's better there in Canada. And I think it gives a lot of strength for emergency medicine doctors as well, that it is better somewhere, and it should go better as well. If you take the appropriate steps, then it can get better. So, and I really like the idea of doing like fellowships or like subspecialties. I think that's one of the areas that Estonia could really improve on as well, to have those more, that not everyone is like made equal emergency medical doctors, and then they have to like improve on their own time after work or something like that, but that they can get like a proper education in that subspecialty.
Yeah, I think it's a great way. And then as the department, when you're organizationally looking at things, you can say, well, okay, we have a bunch of people who have a master's in quality improvement, master's in public health. We have some POCUS people. We have some trauma people. We have a tox person. We have all these experts. We have someone now we hired who does pain. So she does a lot of nerve blocks and ultrasound guided nerve blocks. So like, what a great asset to the department to have someone who did a 2-year pain fellowship and we have people who are pushing the envelope also. Like a bunch of our colleagues have done sports medicine. So they did emergency medicine, and then they did sports medicine, and then they opened within the hospital a minor injury clinic for concussions and non-operative fractures. So now we have an avenue when someone comes in with not like a mid-shaft humerus fracture to send it to these people in follow-up. And there was agreement, it's not stepping on the orthopedic surgeon's toes and territories, but it's created an avenue to provide excellent care for our patients. One of our big things in our hospitals, we have an addictions team, and a lot of our doctors do addictions work. So then we have an inpatient addiction service, which is staffed by some of the emerge docs, or outpatient, where you can call them and say, what do I do with this person? They're on all these meds. They're on methadone. I want to put them on Suboxone, all this stuff. I don't know that stuff. But it's great to know that there's Emerge colleagues that I can text, or they can be on service, that they can come down to the Emerge, their Emerge docs, to help out with addictions. And they're not stepping on anyone's toes. They're just helping patients do better.
Do you feel that that's something also that is like a good career move as well? Because I feel like maybe when you're 20, 30, you want to do the shifts, you want to do all the extreme stuff, but maybe at one point you want to, more specialize or change the perspectives. Does it help with like the career perspective in the years as well?
Totally, Oliver. And as I said to you earlier, you have to have side hustles, right? So all these subspecialties that I've told you about, none of them are working evenings, nights, and weekends. So it's a win. They're earning a living, doing what they love to do, and going home for dinner and driving their kids to school and maybe picking them up and hanging out with their partner at night. I think that gives them that avenue to do something else, not emerge hours. And I think that's the recipe. When I started, people only did emergency medicine. You did your 16 shifts a month, 8-hour shifts, and you did 4 shifts a week, and that was your thing. Now, we don't have anyone in our department. We have 90 doctors. We don't have a single person who just does 16 emerge shifts a month, and that's it. Everyone, or in one site. Everyone is at a second site or a second gig of some sort. The days of I'm going to do 30 to 40 hours a week every week and just do emergency medicine, that's not a long game. It's people who have other things that will succeed. The days of the single only emerge one hospital, that's it. It's not a thing so much here anymore in Toronto, Canada.
And as you said before, that emergency medicine is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So I feel like it really goes well with that.
Absolutely. To me, it's about getting home on time after shift. I'm paid mostly by the hour. There's no point taking 2 hours to clean up. Get home for dinner, get home, start doing homework with the kids or whatever I like to do. Watch the Raptor game or the hockey game, whatever I like to do. It's about leaving. It's about getting out on time. And I look forward to being done work. I love when I'm at work, but I know when it's 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I'm done. And excited to, get home. Unfortunately, the only person who runs to see me these days is the dog. And that's the business of having teenagers. But it's great to be home and it's great to be done. And unlike other specialties, you're done. My wife is an internist, so she's home and then the floor is calling her about a patient who's not doing this or there's a lab abnormality. We're done. My shift ended. Barring some catastrophic fuck up that I did, it's over. There's no one calling me at home. I'm done. And I love that. And maybe that fits to this generation and my brain.
Yeah, absolutely the same here as well. Some of the things that I love about anesthesiology and intensive care as well is that you have shifts and you have work and then you can just switch off, as you said earlier as well. And that's in the ambulance work as well. So true. So that's kind of a relief that you don't take the work home, which is great.
I mean, certainly not physically. I mean, I think emotionally, we certainly take some things home. And, there's certainly moments where you make that phone call to your failure friend or your partner or whoever, and they can hear it in your voice that today wasn't a good day. And I think we'd be remiss to not talk about, I can count on one hand maybe the children I've seen die in my arms. I can remember every single one of them. those never go away. And you have to have something to deal with that stuff too. I mean, now that's the only stuff that comes home with me is mostly it's the interesting cases, the cases that I love, and I'm looking up their results the next day or their MRI findings or certain tests. But sometimes that other stuff does creep in, and that's hard. And I'll say, you can be 50 or 30, but death and tragedy is still always going to be that way. I mean, when I look back on my career, and I look back and I see the junior doctor who some agitated patients like, get me a blanket, get me a tray, get me this. And they're like the first people running to give them blankets and to give them pillows and to bring them a sandwich and bring them juice. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, I didn't even hear that person. Like, I'm deaf to that now. Like, and it's kind of sad. And I think one of the greatest barometers you should kind of hold yourself is think about how you are emotionally before you're about to go on a trip. And think, often that means you've done a lot of shifts in a row because you're about to take a week off or 2 weeks off. And then think about what you're like on that first shift back. And if there's a major delta, if there's a major difference and you're like, you know that you're not all there. And I know that I took a month off. We had this sabbatical month. And for turning 50, I went away to Morocco and Majorca and to France and had a month off. And I came back and I was like the happiest person in the world, giving out blankets and sandwiches and spending more time with people, talking to people, listening better. And it makes you kind of second guess. You're like, I must be such a cruel prick because like 5 weeks ago, I wasn't doing this. And I think it lends itself to a lot of self-reflection. And when I self-reflect a lot, I sometimes think I wish I just was a bit more steady state, because when I do 4 shifts in a row or 5 shifts in a row, whatever it is, I know the type of doctor I am on shift 5 versus shift 1. And I don't always love that.
That's a really good pearl. And it's also frightening, like how the burnout creeps up on you, that you don't even notice yourself, that you need to step away to see how it was before. So it's really good.
And if there's a big difference, that means you're a little bit more burnt than you think. Yeah. That's the only thing I'll say.
Yeah. Do you have any other tips besides Failure Friend, which I really love the concept? We even did like a burnout episode and we recommended to have a Failure Friend for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people the traditional burnout wellness talks includes things like meditation, mindfulness, exercise, and journaling. Those aren't my strengths. Like, I think for me, it's spending time with friends and families and seeing the world and trying to have other interests outside of emergency medicine, be it as hobbies and be it as paychecks. Like, I don't find some of the other jobs I do aren't very look, I don't find emergency medicine that stressful, to be very honest. It is what it is. The other thing I would say is that I don't internalize failures. Like, if the department's in bad shape and there's a lot of patients to be seen and there's a huge wait, I didn't cause that. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm one person who's pretty efficient, who's pretty quick, who's not slow. If I can't fix it, I don't make it my problem. I want to advocate for patients and make sure I'm seeing patients creatively and helping them out. But I can only do so much, and I don't let it beat me down. And some people get so upset and they think so much about it and they waste a lot of time in terms of doing it. It's like, it's just a system problem. I'm not in government. I don't pretend to be a politician. I'm way too opinionated. I'm always thrilled when politicians get stuck in our merge. Certainly those aren't the ones I'm seeing out of turn because I want them to see what it's like. But I don't get stressed about a failing system. Otherwise, if you do, all of our systems are failing because our parents are all old. We have this geriatric tsunami, and the baby boomers are taking up all of our time, and we don't have a lot of primary care, and we don't have a lot of affordable housing, and we don't have a lot of places for nursing homes for patients to go. But I can't fix that. I'm not like it's just not my job. My job's to be in a good emerge doc, and maybe that's a shallow way of thinking. But you really can get yourself beat up if you just think about the macabre system that we operate in. And I'm sure your system has similar problems to ours.
Mm-hmm. Don't get stressed about things that you can't control.
Yeah. I mean, there are people who want to control them. and they're going to go into government and policy and CEOs of the hospital. I'm thrilled about those people. It's not me. But there are people who want to fix that. If that's not you, then just be the N of one. Do your thing. Yeah. Think about your kids, your family, your parents, your next vacation, your next concert that you're going to play, and that's it. I don't know. Don't stress.
I remember also reading a scientific article about meditation, and it showed that some people really got more stressed because of it, because they couldn't focus. They couldn't just, sit there 15 minutes and just think about nothing, and it made them more stressed. So I really like the idea of, finding your own thing to have that stress relief, that it's not, you can't just read algorithm and just do it, and it works 100% of the times.
Yeah, like for me, I have a dog who loves me more than anyone else in the house does. I mean, a pet is a wonder. Like, you know what? When I'm in a bad mood or when my kids are in a bad mood, I'm like, take the dog for a walk. And whoever takes that dog for a walk, somehow they come home and they're not pissy and they're not grumpy. And that's often me. But it's like, okay, like I went to took the dog for a walk, and like all he did was like pee and smell things. Like that's what makes him happy. And then I'm not so bothered anymore, like, I don't know. Just got to find your avenues. Mm-hmm. Everyone's different. I think these blanket approaches to wellness where they say everyone should do X, Y, and Z are wrong. Just like your article points out, like clearly I would be that person in the study who freaks out because silence would be deafening to me. I can't go to a retreat where you don't talk for 3 days. 3 days, I think I would have a psychotic break. So,
So should we have like therapeutic dogs in our wards?
I think so. I think they're great. I mean, I went to a conference in Bydgoszcz, Poland last year where they talked about this therapeutic dog. I think it's great. And I was never a dog person. Like I never grew up with pets, and my kids begged me right before the pandemic. A lot of people got pets during the pandemic, but we had it before, and they kind of teamed up on me 4 against 1 and got the dog. And of course, like all of them, I love him a ton. Yeah. He's actually in the back here just waiting. He heard me talking, so he wants to hang.
Yeah. So what dog is it?
We have an Australian Labradoodle. A lot of in North America, it's a lot of these like designer breeded brands that don't shed and are hypoallergenic and smart, and they're not purebred like hunting dogs or anything like that.
Awesome. And thank you for taking the time to instead of hanging out with the dog, being with us here in the podcast studio.
Oh, it's great. I feel like I rambled a lot, and I don't know if we probably covered 10 topics in my wish list that are jumbled that would be up for you to organize. But I think emergency medicine and I think medicine in general is more than a list. It's just a mind frame. And I hope we were able to cover some topics that your listeners in Estonia, that they resonate with them, because it's just my story and everyone has their own story.
Absolutely. I found it to be extremely inspiring, and there were so many good pearls and things to think about in a systemic level, and also like more on a personal side as well. So it has been absolutely a pleasure to have you on this podcast. It still feels kind of surreal to have you here and to do that podcast in English as well. I really hope that you can get a chance to come to Estonia as well someday.
I'm waiting for the invitation.
We have to get the invitation. Thank you so much for finding the time, and it was an absolutely pleasure. We're gonna do the 10 wishes list. We're gonna put it in Estonian on our website. I think we can definitely do it from this loads of good pearls and tips.
Awesome. Have a great holidays. Wishing all your listeners a Merry Christmas and happy holidays and safe holidays. And it's always tough to work over the holidays. We're the only suckers working Christmas and New Year's. So make sure you celebrate yourself. Yeah. Make sure you get yourself something fun, buy yourself a gift, reward yourself, because sometimes that's a forgotten thing that we often don't get.
In Estonian, Merry Christmas is Häid jõule.
I'm not going to attempt that.
It's a bit difficult.
Don't quiz me.
Maybe next time when you come to Estonia,
I would love that.
Then we will get more time to teach you Estonian as well.
That would be great.
But thank you so much. Hea kuulaja, suur aitäh, et sa seda jõulueri kuulasid, see oli nüüd täielikult inglise keeles ja me võtame selle vabaduse, et me inglise keeles seda eesti keelde ei tõlgi, et lihtsalt hoida seda David Carri karismaatilisust ja neid ägedaid lugusid nii tõetruuna, kui need vähegi olid. Mul oli uskumatult suur au võõrustada Dr. David Carri, kes on Toronto ülikooli erakorralise meditsiini professor ja ma loodan, et te leidsite ka siit endale midagi põnevat ja huvitavat. Ja kuna on jõuluaeg ja see on jõulueri, siis tõesti suur aitäh, et te olete kõik meid kuulanud, meile kirjutanud, meile tagasisidet andnud, et need viimased 1,5 aastat on olnud uskumatult imelised ja toredad. Ja mõnes mõttes see võimalus ka David Carriga, keda ma olen alati ise alt üles vaadanud, niimoodi rääkida podcasti vormis ja see, et on nõus tulema meie Deltakutse podcasti, et see on minu suur unistuse täitumine. Ja see on olnud ainult võimalik tänu teile, nii et suur aitäh, et olete meid kuulanud ja me jätkame ja meil tuleb uuel aastal juba palju häid ja põnevaid osasi, nii et kuulake meid edasi ja ma soovin teile kõigile ja teie peredele häid jõule ja head vana aasta lõppu ja head uut aastat.